Please be seated. Today, it's really apropos. We have Jonah, really kind of a missionary, sent by God to the Ninevites in a hostile territory. And the Ninevites were an enemy of the Jews, but yet he's sent by God to kind of bring them into the fold. And they reject him. They don't reject him. He's a little upset they do what our Lord asks. So it's interesting. But tonight I know we're commemorating the great North American martyrs. Those 8 French Jesuits who had come off to North America to teach the Iroquois and the Huron Indians about God. They were martyred really between the years 1642 and 1649. 3 at Voorheesville, New York, and the 5 others up in Canada. Goupil, Jogues, Lalande, and Chabanel were tomahawked to death. Daniel, my Jesuit tonight, and Garnier was shot and killed with arrows. Brebeuf and Lallemant were brutally and cruelly tortured to death. 6 were priests. Goupil and Lalande were coadjutor brothers. They were canonized by Pope Pius XI in 1930. The interesting thing, where I did I'm a Jesuit, and where I did my novitiate was St. Isaac Jogues. And it was interesting, we had the banner, when that canonization was done in 1930, there was a famous woman from New York who really helped finance it. She's buried in our novitiate under the main altar. But what she brought back, and it's hanging in the chapel there, was the main kind of banner with the North American martyrs. If you go to St. Peter's, they hang it usually up in front of the basilica. So they were able to obtain that, put it in our chapel at Shaughnessy. But tonight, I'm going to talk about someone you don't hear that often about, Antoine Daniel. He was kind of a patient, kind of very bright, incredible, gifted in languages, but he was known best for his persevering efforts to train the Huron youth in the Christian faith in the hope that they might plant it among their family and friends. So, I kind of imagine Antoine Daniel as a tall, kind of gaunt figure. He's dressed in a black cassock as a Jesuit priest, with a smile across his face as he steps from a Huron canoe. And that's how he was described by one of his fellow priests when he returned to Quebec from the Jesuit missions in Huronia. As one of the North American martyrs, St. Anthony Daniel spent 16 years serving as a missionary in Eastern Canada and the United States. They said he had an incredible talent for making friends quickly and for teaching children. St. Anthony was born in Dieppe, France in 1601, and his father was a merchant. So Anthony grew up with 3 brothers. He joined the Jesuit order at 20, and after completing 3 years at university, 2 in philosophy and 1 in law, he taught at the Jesuit college in France. While teaching, Father Daniel had a chance to catechize and baptize a Huron student who had come back to France to study. And in 1626, the Jesuits in New France wrote to those in France about the possibility of all these missionaries meant for America. And the student was named Amantaka, and he had come to France to study. And he was kind of the model student for the Hurons, showing them that an education was useful, and the French weren't that bad after all. His presence in France may have done more to inspire missionaries than to encourage friendship with their Hurons. Leon Pio in his biography notes that the presence of that young Huron at Rouen did not escape Daniel's notice. It may have been that it played some part, really, in his vocation to go to North America. However, it wasn't a good time to be a missionary. In 1629, the English seized Francis's lands in North America and forced the Jesuits to return home. At that time, St. Jean was both one of the 8 missionaries who had spent 2 years among the Hurons, took his sabbatical at Rouen, and he surely shared his stories of New France with Father Daniel, and further encouraged the priest to really go to the mission. He would also have gotten news of New France from another source. That was his brother, Charles, who was a captain of one of the French vessels sent to relieve Quebec, and a thick fog had pushed him off his course, and he arrived at Cape Breton instead, which was the wrong port. There he demolished an English fort and established his own, then sailed for France with his prisoners. The French flag really flew over that fort for 3 years that the English held Quebec. Now, in 1632, England returned Quebec to France, and his brother, Captain Charles Daniel, sailed once again for Cape Breton with his brother and another priest. The 2 priests spent a year working among the First Nations peoples. Then they were called to Quebec. Father Daniel spent another year learning Huron, and he made a swift progress with the language. Really incredible what they did. And in July, the 3 missionaries headed for the Jesuit missions up in Huronia, a distance traveled by the Jesuit missionaries in New France. And the difficulties of those travels are mind-boggling. One biographer describes the burning sun, the dreary silences, exhausting portages, miserable food, swarms of mosquito, endless paddling, and that beset all those young missionaries on their maiden voyage. As that wasn't bad enough, the Hurons dumped him on an island halfway on their journey, and he continued without him. But Father Daniel's missionary vocation may have ended there if a traveling bear chief hadn't picked him up and taken him to his village. Finally, along with the other Jesuits, Father Daniels finally began his missionary work. And he visited the sick in their cabins. He brought food to them. He instructed as many as he could in the fundamentals of the faith. He also became a favorite with the children. He taught them to sing the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the 10 Commandments, which he made into Huron rhymes. The children formed a choir which added beauty and solemnity to the chapel services. Now, during this time, Father Daniel was also reunited with that student I mentioned at the beginning, Amantha. He was a Huron young man, and a group of wounded Hurons arrived in the village one day after being attacked by the Iroquois, and a number had been taken prisoner. But among those who escaped was Father Antoine Daniel's first Huron pupil. However, Father Daniel soon learned that his student had reverted in his faith, and after he had returned to France. So, Amantha Near's escape from death all of a sudden caused him to attribute his safety to God's protection, and he soon brought his whole family into the faith and became a really fervent apostle. Again, seeing Father Daniel's success with all the children of the missions, the Jesuits decided to start a boys' school in Quebec. They appointed Father Daniel as the first teacher, and he convinced the dozens of families to send their sons to the school because it would cement their friendship with the French and help them become better traders. However, when the time came to depart, the Huron mothers were loath to give up their sons, so all 3 abandoned Father Daniel and returned home. After After a long and difficult journey, Father Antoine and his pupils arrived at the Three Rivers in August. And he managed to teach them reading and writing, prayer and religious doctrine, carpentry and wood carving, and how to serve Mass. However, before success could be celebrated, a big disaster struck. Two of the students became seriously ill and died. Father Daniel nursed them as best he could day and night, and after their deaths, he collapsed with influenza himself. The Jesuits worried what the Hurons would think of their sons dying while at school. But the plague was decimating all of Huronia, and they continually blamed the Jesuits for bringing the disease. So, when Father Daniel recovered, he was left with two students, Auburn and Joseph. A few more students came the next summer, but soon departed again. Auburn and Joseph made great progress and were fervent in their faith. And that encouraged Father Antoine, as he believed his efforts for them would be rewarded with the spread of the gospel. That time came sooner than expected. The plague spreading among the Hurons had caused distrust and fear of the priests. Father Daniel, Auburn, and Joseph were sent to Huronia to show that the French meant no harm. And on the way, Auburn nearly drowned when his canoe capsized. Then Father Daniel was separated from his students. Finally, utterly exhausted and half-starving, he arrived at the village, and his students had succeeded in their missions. The Hurons' anger against the Jesuits and the French had abated somewhat. With the boys' schools being dispersed, Father Daniel then returned to the mission work. He remained in that work, which is extremely difficult. The Hurons and the Iroquois didn't trust them, didn't believe them. And the priests who lived with them, they faced constant threat from the Iroquois. And the Hurons were also deeply suspicious of priests and religious items, which the Hurons regarded as magic, with holy water and incense. Time and again, they turned against the priests, kicking them out and attacking them. Again and again, the priests tried to reason with them. Auburn, his student, became a lay apostle that Father Daniel had expected. He distinguished himself for bravery in many of the battles between the Hurons and the Iroquois. He was also the leader of the sodality of the servants of Mary. They recited the rosary at daybreak. They sang the litanies or hymns to the Blessed Mother in the evening. He also witnessed a miracle when a fierce storm that threatened to capsize his canoe was carried and calmed after all of his prayers. Then, in 1641, several missions were combined, kind of into a central mission called Sainte Marie. And Father Daniel spent the next 7 years there. This missionary became an exemplary Christian colony, where Sunday was a great festival day, and a chapel finally was built in 1646 with a bell and beautiful Huron decorations. Baptisms were frequent, and Father Daniel worked harder than ever. He spent long hours of prayers, staying up late in the night for his devotions, and he sent great reports back to France. Then, on July 4th, 1648, Father Daniel was finishing Mass when the Iroquois attacked. He had just returned from his annual retreat with the other priests, who had begged him to stay a day or two longer with them. Insisting that his people needed him, he returned to Santa Maria to hear confessions and celebrate Mass. As the warriors grabbed their weapons and the women and children ran for the woods, Father Daniel baptized the sick and the aged who couldn't flee. For a time, the palisade walls kept the Iroquois out, but soon it became clear that the walls wouldn't hold. The Hurons retreated to the chapel, as that seemed a good place to die. Father Antoine joined them, telling them to escape. Then, as the Iroquois broke through the palisades, he walked to meet them, and he forbade them to enter the chapel. The Iroquois were kind of surprised by this, and they halted their attack for a few minutes. Now, those minutes perhaps gave some of the people a chance to escape. Then the Iroquois showed Father Antoine the arrows and threw his body into the flames, which was consumed with the fire they set at the chapel. He was a man on a mission given by God. He was canonized, as I said, in 1930 by Pius XI. He was the second Jesuit martyr in New France. In his superior wrote of Antoine, he was a truly remarkable man, humble, obedient, united with God, never failing patience, and indomitable courage in adversity. Today up in Canada and Ontario, there's a couple of schools named in honor of him. His feast day, along with the 7 other Canadian martyrs, is on September 26th. They're also known as the North American martyrs, and that feast day is celebrated in the U.S. on October 19th. But what's important about the saints and our devotion to them, and this is really apropos, is their witness. And that's what martyr means, a witness to the faith. And what were they witness to? They were witness to the truth of the gospel and all it entailed. And in this month of October, it's a pro-life month. And it's a great opportunity for us as missionaries to show witness, to be there for the dignity of human life. And that's an important part of all of our apostles, even the lay people more so, is to stand up for the unique and unappealable gift of God, which is human life. However, at whatever stage it's in. You know, we're constantly barraged by, as we remember with Anthony Fauci, don't you get the science? Well, as any of us who took biology in high school know, human life began at conception. And it's the DNA and everything else, there's no disputing that. But now all of a sudden they want to say, well, it's not a human life, it's a potential human life. No, it's a human life. And I think we should recall the words of Pope John Paul, especially. Be not afraid. Christ, it is through you that I am to be called, not afraid. Pray for the courage to strive unceasingly for the faith, and having found it, and having found you, the strength to live by it. Follow Christ. Christ, it is you that I follow. Give me your grace, so that even in my fallen nature, I may see all decisions as a choice between good and evil, and choose to follow you. The truth will set you free. Christ, it is through you that I find true freedom. Give me the wisdom to recognize that freedom that consists not in having the right to do what I want, but in having the right to do what I ought. Totus tuus, Christ, help me to be totally yours. Give me the faith of Mary and your holy saints and martyrs, to give this life up to you in praise and reverence and service. We ask this in Christ's name, but also St. Daniel's name. And the prayer that St. Ignatius wrote in the exercises is really, I think, a good way to end this. And it goes very briefly. Lord, teach us to be generous. Teach us to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for any reward, except to know that we are doing